Welcome to the VSC Begins Here podcast series. The Victim Service Center, or the VSC, is a nonprofit organization that provides free, individualized counseling and other services to survivors of any kind of trauma in Central Florida. With me today, I have VSC's lead therapist, Brandy Godby, to chat about one option survivors have for healing: support groups. Thank you for being here, Brandy.
Thank you for having me. It's good to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to start off, I think a lot of people might just be curious what a support group is. So what exactly is a support group?
A support group is kind of what it sounds like, where a group of individuals come together in the theme of support. And a lot of our support groups have variations on who those people might be and what the support is around. But it's different than a closed therapy group in that you might have different folks at different meetings. There's no requirement or commitment for attendance. So people can kind of show up, check it out, and they might see different members in that group. And there might be different conversations about different topics depending on what folks want to talk about. It's very survivor driven and survivor led.
Yeah, so there's kind of like this kind of socialization going on, like everyone's kind of coming together, doing different like coping mechanisms and stuff like that, and coping strategies.
Yeah, in fact, one of the main things that people say they want to get out of attending a support group is learning how others are coping and managing. So there's a lot of interpersonal learning, and then, there's also just being in a room with other survivors is very healing in and of itself, because there's a lot of stigma and shame around some of the reasons that people come to VSC.
Yeah, and that actually kind of leads me to another question, which, how is this different than like one-on-one counseling?
It is wildly different, but in a really good way. One-on-one, we can go, usually it's deeper in different ways, but in a group environment, you're really getting to experience other people. Sure. And those other people are all different. I mean, everybody has their own lived experience. And so in the group environment, you get that experience of universality where it's like, I'm not alone. And you can start to build some of the connections with other people in a way that would be unethical, within a therapy room one-on-one.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me to, what are some of those benefits? Because you were mentioning how they're not feeling alone, and I know that's really important for survivors of trauma. What are other kind of like things that you've heard from clients who have joined support groups and the benefits that they've experienced?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people experience installation of hope. That's actually a group therapeutic factor by Yalom for any, therapy nerds out there. But that installation of hope, seeing other people like, wow, maybe one day I'll be there. And also seeing folks who are maybe on the beginning of their healing journey and realizing, I'm a lot further than I thought. Maybe I have done some healing. So the installation of hope is a really big factor in those groups.
Absolutely. And have you heard from clients specifically, like, of course, remaining confidential, but anything that they've gained from support groups specifically at the VSC? Yeah,
I mean, there are people who have found support unlike anywhere else in their lives. They may not have family members that completely understand their experiences and or how to support their healing journeys. And so being around other people that get it can feel like a safe and sacred place. And they feel seen in different ways because sometimes being in that environment with other survivors, they feel like they can really show up and be authentic. Like, this is where I am in my healing journey, and not have to put on role of spouse or partner or parent or whatever it is.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the things that I really wanted to talk about today is what someone can actually expect going to a support group at the VSC.
Well, first and foremost, we do a screening for all people who are interested in attending. And so that's just getting basic information to make sure it is the right place and the right time. If someone's in kind of an immediate crisis stage, it may not be the best idea, it may not be as healing. So we want to make sure that they're comfortable enough. Doesn't mean that there's going to be no anxiety, because they probably can expect a little bit of anxiousness going in. Wow, I'm going to go in this room with other people. Not everybody feels that way. Some people are really excited, but they can expect going through some questions on a pre-screening with one of our facilitators, and during that process discussing grounding, coping, how they'll manage being in the room, and also a guideline of what to, expect, as you're saying, right? So all support groups, two non-negotiables that I say in all of my support groups are confidentiality and respect.
Right.
So confidentiality meaning, what's said in the room stays in the room with the folks in the room. We don't go home and say, oh, guess what Emily said in the group tonight.
Right.
We can talk about general themes like, wow, other people were talking about anger and I felt less alone. Mm-hmm. But we keep that confidentiality very sacred. It helps the group feel safe. And the respect piece is knowing that people are in different places on their journey. They've had different experiences with their trauma, and they have different lived experiences as people that may influence, their healing journey as well.
Yeah, and that safety I think is so important, because I think a lot of survivors can be a little nervous joining support groups. So what would you say to a survivor who's a little nervous but thinking about it, but they're not sure if it's right for them?
I would say welcome to the club. I mean, most people who go to the support groups are feeling nervous.
Right.
And usually when I talk to people who are interested in attending, I say, say it out loud, because chances are you're not the only one. Definitely not the first, won't be the last. It's completely normal, and we anticipate some nervousness going in. But give it a chance, and just check it out and see how it feels. Speak about it and know that you are in a place where we focus on this work. The Victim Service Center is very trauma informed, and our facilitators know what they're doing.
Right, yeah. And I've heard of this concept of like the 3 tries concept, because you said give it a try. So what is that?
Yeah, so I always tell everyone, try at least 3 different groups before making a judgment call. Because as I was saying earlier, the groups will have different members and they'll have different topics. And so someone may attend and be like, I didn't really connect to the topic. People were talking about dating. I've been in a, committed relationship or relationships, doesn't apply to me. No worries. Come back again, because the next time they may talk about coping mechanisms that you really wanted to, hear from others about. So because there's different people and different topics, it's worth giving multiple tries just to see what you can get out of it.
Absolutely. And what are the exact support groups that VSC currently offers?
So this is super exciting because we've grown them so much. We do have women's support groups. We have a men's support group. Both of those are for sexual trauma survivors. We have a Black African American female healing group. We have a Spanish speakers support group. We have Parenting as a Survivor support group, and we have Rainbow Resilience, which is for our LGBTQ identified survivors.
That's great. And how are these support groups made? Are they because of the community response, or?
I would say yes. I mean, some of these, are kind of you're going to have a support group for sexual trauma. Right. But we started to branch out into specifics by client request. Sure. We had people who specifically wanted a women's support group. We had a lot of folks of color who really wanted to be with other folks of color. Right. And then, the Parenting as a Survivor one is very interesting because that came out of a closed therapy group where they were like, hey, I'm a parent. I don't know how to handle, being a parent and feeling comfortable in my decisions based on my history of sexual trauma. Hey, me too. Hey, can we have a group about this? Can we talk about it? And so we made one.
That's amazing. Yeah. And, we just have a couple of minutes left together. So how can someone actually, join a support group? What is the process? Yeah,
so contact any of our facilitators. Or call the main office. That's 407-254-9415. If you go on our website, victimservicecenter.org, you should see some information under, the support group section. So any way you get in touch with anyone will funnel through to one of the facilitators to set up that initial screening.
Okay, that sounds amazing. And is there anything else that you want to kind of say before we wrap up here?
Just that groups are an amazing experience. There's nothing like it, and seeing the way that it's been such a catalyst for a lot of folks' healing journeys is really it's really cool to see. It's cool to see that people feel less shame and some more empowerment as they gain that hope along with coping skills.
Thank you so much, Brandy, for that great overview of support groups at the VSC.
You're so welcome. I'm excited to share the information. Thank you for having me.
And actually next, we will be having Jocelyn, one of our victim advocates, actually our senior victim advocate, Jocelyn, to chat a bit about the women's support group she leads at the VSC, so don't go away. Welcome back to the VSE Healing Begins Here podcast. In this segment, we have Jocelyn Reyes, one of our amazing senior victim advocates and crisis counselors here at the VSC, to chat about the support group she runs at the Victim Service Center. So Jocelyn, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Very excited.
I know.
I'm very excited to talk a little bit about your support group. Before we do that, can you tell me a little bit about you and what you do at the VSC?
Yeah, so my role at the VSC, as you mentioned, I am the senior victim advocate and crisis counselor there, but my role focuses more on what we call our acute services, and that's, individuals who need a forensic collection, also known as a rape kit within the community. So that's what I deal with the most.
And I also know that there's a 24-hour helpline, right?
Yeah, so we have a 24/7 helpline. People can call at whatever time during the day, and I answer it mostly during the day from 8 to 5, unless there's something in my schedule going on or we have a case that we have to respond to. But the helpline and acute cases is what I focus with.
Absolutely. And who can call that helpline? Just anyone who's looking for help or looking to talk to someone?
So honestly, anyone can call. We've gotten calls from out of state, believe it or not, out of country. Whatever they seem to Google mostly relates to sexual assault, and our number pops up. And we don't turn them away if we can't offer them services. So anyone can call, and we'll direct them to the best resource or helpline that we can if we can't do anything ourselves for them.
That sounds amazing. And I also had a question too. I think victim advocates also do some crisis counseling. Is that right?
Yes.
So what's that like?
So crisis counseling is a little bit different. I know counseling and therapy go hand in hand. What we focus with on crisis counseling is essentially just making sure that they have the appropriate coping skills. We want positive coping skills so that when we do an in-house referral to our therapy department and they dive more into their trauma there with a therapist, if they do become, triggered by anything, they have the coping skills they need in order to ground themselves. And then as well as case management is kind of similar to what we do in crisis counseling. We just want to make sure that we remove any current stressor that they may have going on, reduce that so when they do go into therapy, they can focus specifically on their trauma.
That makes a lot of sense. And speaking of, groups and other crisis counseling and stuff like that, tell me a little bit about the women's support group that you run.
Yeah, so the women's support group, I actually inherited that. So, unfortunately, when advocates decide to leave VSC to pursue other career endeavors, it switches to another facilitator. So I did become the facilitator for the women's support group. I want to say probably around the summertime, if I'm not mistaken, of 2021. So due to COVID, it was virtual. And then with the member demand, it did become in person. So I am doing that in person right now, and it's great. I have, more energy from them. It just feels more comfortable, so that's amazing. But my women's support group, and I say my because we have two support groups, and another advocate runs the other women's support group. So mine is in person. It's the third Thursday of every month, and the virtual one is the first Thursday of every month.
Nice.
So we have two different women's support groups going on. So, if one time doesn't work for someone, they always have that second group to rely on.
That's really nice. I didn't know we had both the virtual and the in-person.
Yes, because we do want to be, very considerate to the fact that COVID still exists, unfortunately.
Right.
So if they don't feel comfortable being in person, but they do want to, definitely be with other survivors who know what they're going through, they can log in virtually as well.
That's amazing. And it also helps also with transportation.
Absolutely.
I assume.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just because, sometimes if they get out of work, they can't make it directly to in-person, but they can, log on to be virtual.
That makes a lot of sense. And how long is a support group session?
So our groups are an hour and a half long. Kind of touches base differently. In person is 5:30 to 7 p.m. and then virtual is 5 to 6:30.
Okay. And what exactly kind of goes on during this support group? What does it look like?
Exactly what the word sounds like. So it's
fair.
a group, and it's meant for survivors of sexual violence. Obviously, they have to be female. It's a women's support group. And they come in, and it's not a structured group, I will say. We don't have a specific topic that we're going to discuss. I don't lead it. It's for them to come in and just be able to discuss anything that they've been experiencing since the last time they attended group, or something that, that happened to them that day, and they just need to discuss it with other survivors who would be able to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And when did this actually start? I know that you started being a facilitator in the summer of 21, but how long has this support group actually existed?
So overall, I started with VSC in 2019, and I know that support groups, were a thing already when I started. They've been within the agency for a while, but the specific group that I inherited from the facilitator that, did move on from VSC, Actually, that group started in February of 2020, just due to the demand. It was actually co-ed, but we always ask our clients what is it that they are looking for, and a specific group for women only was something that was requested. So that did start in February of 2020.
Got it. And I assume that it's changed because members kind of come and go, right?
Yes. So we definitely have tried, different things to see what would work, what can get more members in. Right now, what is really working for me is that, again, there's no specific structure, but we do have a little jar. So if there's certain topics that people want to discuss, but they may feel uncomfortable, bringing it up themselves, they will write it down on a piece of paper. That's how I start all of the groups. They fold it, they put it in the jar. I'll pick out a topic, read it out loud. They can share their thoughts on that. And that usually leads to maybe about 5 to 10 minute conversation. And once I see it die down, I go and I grab another topic from out the jar. Usually we're able to do maybe 2 to 3 different jar topics.
That's amazing. And I know that earlier in the last segment, we were talking a little bit about some ground rules and things like that. So what are the ground rules of this group?
So the main one is confidentiality. It's a safe space that we have for survivors. So we just want to make sure that, what's discussed in that room stays in that room, not going, back home or talking to a friend and saying, hey, this member Emily shared X, Y, and Z. When it was virtual, we did ask them to be in a room where they are by themselves. And, if that kind of wasn't something that they were able to do, we just asked them to use headphones. So again, they're the only ones who are using the audio. But that's the main one. Second one is just respect. We want to show respect to everyone who shows up. And there are a couple of other rules. There's kind of a list of them, and we kind of also just, include rules as we go along if something were to pop up.
Got it. And I know we only have a couple of minutes left, but how can someone join this group? Who's eligible? Things like that.
So again, the group is specifically for women who have been survivors of sexual violence. So that would be who would be eligible for this group. And the way to sign up, they can call our main office, they can call the 24/7 helpline, or if they go to our website, there's a little section that they can send an inquiry, and it arrives to us via email, and they'll have one of the facilitators reach out to go ahead and coordinate a group screening for them before they're able to start with the actual group.
Got it. And I just wanted, as a final question here, I wanted to ask you, how has running the support group been impactful for you personally?
It definitely makes me feel good to be able to hold a space for survivors. The group starts at 5:30, so I've already been through an 8 to 5 work day, and by 5:30 I'm a little bit drained, but once the conversation starts going and I see how much fun they're having and they're laughing, it just makes me feel good to be able to provide that, getaway safe space for them at least once a month.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. I really appreciate you talking about our women's support group.
Thanks for inviting me.
And in our next and final segment, we will be chatting with one of our therapists, Tamara Nelson, to talk about the group she runs for Black and African American Female Healing Support Group. So stay tuned. Welcome back to the VSC Healing Begins Here podcast. In our third and final segment, we are joined by one of our rock star therapists, Tamara Nelson, to chat about the group she co-facilitates, Black and African American Female Healing Support Group. So Tamara, happy to have you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm super excited to talk about this really important support group with you today. I wanted to just open it up to see if you could just tell a little bit about what you do and the work that you do at the VSC.
Yeah, so my name is Tamara Nelson. I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I'm also a certified clinical trauma professional, also a registered yoga teacher. And I work full-time for UCS Counseling and Psychological Services. And then I work part-time as a contract therapist with the Victim Service Center of Central Florida. I also was formerly a full-time therapist and advocate in the past with VSC.
Yeah, that's right. I keep forgetting that you used to be an advocate as well, but then you came back. So I'm really happy to have you continue being part of VSC. And I know that one of the things that you do as a therapist at the VSC is that you run one of our support groups. So can you talk a little bit about that support group?
Yeah, so as you mentioned before, the Black African American Female Healing Support Group, the description is, in the name. It's for individuals who identify as Black and female that have experienced some form of interpersonal trauma, which is basically just any trauma that was at the hands of another person. That can include domestic violence, that can include sexual assault, childhood abuse. And it's a group, it's a space for Black women to be able to just discuss topics that are important to them. So we very much leave it open to what the group finds important. We do not impose topics onto the group. It's a safe space. It's a space where group members can support each other as well, and to just discuss matters that they feel are important to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also wanted to ask you too, when was this group actually created?
Yeah, so the group started it was in 2020 when we first, so I co-facilitated the group with one of the other contract therapists, Natalie Summers, who is also a licensed mental health counselor. And we started it in 2020. So Brandy, who, is the lead therapist with VSC, she actually had reached out to me and asked if I would be interested in co-facilitating the group. And this was after I had left VSC and I was, working for UCF. And I think the reason why she reached out to me, because this is something that I had talked about wanting to do when I was working as a therapist with VSC. So I, really appreciated that she remembered that and thought of me. So I was ecstatic, agreed to do it. So yeah, we started it in 2020 and we've been running it ever since.
That's amazing. And why, you talked a little bit about you wanting to create it. So why was it created? Were you hearing from clients that this was a need?
Yes. So in my work as a therapist with VSC, something I would like commonly, or patterns that I was seeing whenever we would have like our general support groups or any other support groups that weren't necessarily like specific to any identity, I would notice that I was not seeing Black identified individuals showing up to those groups. And so it would, make me question, because if you look at statistics, trauma is happening in the Black community. And so why am I not seeing this, represented in our group? So that was something I would always question myself, like, why aren't they showing up? And I would attend community events that were, specific to trauma, conversations about trauma in the Black community. And hearing from community members, it was really important to them that wherever they went to get help or support, that it be a place where there were others that looked like them, or there were clinicians that looked like them. So representation was important. That was the common theme I was hearing in my individual sessions with my Black clients. that's something that they would often share, needing specific spaces for them to feel safe. So that was why I felt it was important to have a group of this nature.
Thank you so much for that amazing overview of that. I think that that really just highlights you explaining when there's this kind of just general support group, that when you explain that you're not seeing certain individuals represented within that. And I just think that that's such an important aspect as to why we have these specific support groups for survivors at VSC. So with that, I wanted to shift a little bit. What is it like to be a member of this support group?
Yeah, so I guess I'll just speak kind of what the group is like. So at the start, of course, we always do a group screening for those who are interested to, make sure that they know what they're signing up for and what to expect, and that they're in a space where they're ready for this type of group. And then on our first group session, we always start, getting the group members warmed up to each other, then being able to get to know each other. We'll do, icebreaker activities. But the group sessions are really just, we'll start off with a check-in. So group members will have the opportunity to kind of just share what's been going on for them since the last time that we met. And then we open the space up to, does anybody have a particular topic that they want to bring up today? Or does anybody want to just share something that maybe came up for them since the last group session? That usually gets things started. And then the conversation just rolls from there. It's always very deep, rich conversations. And group members have the opportunity to also support each other, give each other feedback, share their thoughts on things that were shared. So because I'm not a group member, I can't say exactly what their experience is like, but that's kind of how the group sessions typically go. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that that's great. Gives a great overview for people to know kind of what to expect when coming into this support group. I wanted to ask specifically, who is eligible to join?
Yeah, so anyone who is a existing client with VSC is able to join. They don't necessarily have to be a VSC client, but if it's someone that's maybe being referred from the community, we would want to have like a release of information for their therapist so that, we're able to communicate if needed. And then what also goes into criteria is like readiness for groups. So not everybody's like in a space where, they're ready to interact in a group. So those are some of the things that we discuss in the screening, being able to manage emotions that may come up, or if they are triggered, because this is a trauma group. So sometimes conversations surrounding trauma do come up, and we want to make sure that group members are able to self-regulate in those moments, or to be able to reach out for help and support if need be. And someone who has an interest in receiving that type of support, wanting to be, challenge themselves to be vulnerable with others and to share and to also provide support to others is also important, because that's a core part of group in general. Trying to think of other criteria. Not being actively in crisis. So we want to make sure that person is relatively stable, has existing coping skills, because if you are in a crisis situation, you're probably not going to benefit a lot from a group like this, because, obviously your needs would be more so focused on mitigating that crisis first. Absolutely. So those are some of the main things that we look for.
Thank you so much, Tamara. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk more about our support group, specifically for Black and African American healing support group. So thank you so much, Tamara.
Thank you.
And if you would like to learn more about the VSC and our free services, including support groups, please visit thevictimservicecenter.org, call our office line, or call our crisis line at 407-500-HEAL or HEAL. And to everyone listening, healing is not linear, and you are not alone. Thank you so much.